I remember when we drove from Wau to Torit. Something began to happen on the streets. We were told to step out of our car and lie on the ground. There was a shooting, and I saw one of the rebels lying on the ground. The army beat him and then shot him. I remember, though I was very small at the time, how they pulled out a broad bean grain, some peas, and a cross. A cross. I remember it all to this day.
Sudan, one of Africa's biggest countries, has since regaining its independence from the British in 1956, experienced a history filled with exceptional drama. It was then that a pro-Islamic dictatorship came to power. The Sudan became entangled in two drawn-out civil wars. The underlying cause of these conflicts lay with the political and economic dominance of the North over the largely non-Arabic and non-Muslim South. The first war ended in 1972. The second flared up in 1983. Those 20 war years and the subsequent humanitarian disaster cost the country over 2 million lives and 4 million refugees forced to leave their homes. Large refugee camps were rapidly established on the periphery of Khartoum, where people were accommodated in cardboard, straw and sack housing. Sometimes entire families resided on only 6 square meters. With no secure water supply, abysmal hygiene conditions, no adequate food supply, no work, no privacy, very few thought about a luxury such as education. Apart from this, the overwhelming majority did not know classical Arabic, the teaching language in all the state schools in northern Sudan.
The government would not accept our children. Schools from the south were not relocated, so that when we came here, education became a problem. Our children were saved when the church authorities opened schools.
The Archbishop at the time, moved by this situation, thought of opening some feeding centers, some kindergartens, and some primary schools. It initially began from primary 1 to primary 3, to be able to educate these children other than staying there the whole day doing nothing. The main focus was to help the children of these displaced people. The government was not there to help these children. It was not opening schools for them. The church was practically, at that time, taking care of all the other needs of these people.
Church-organized schools became the only means of educating children and young people from refugee families as part of the Save the Saveable program run by the Catholic Church.
The Save the Saveable program, school program, started back in 1986. It was started by His Eminence Cardinal Gabriel Zuberwako, who started it as a way of responding to the situation of many displaced people who are running from the south, from the east, and from the northern part of Sudan to the northern part of the country, mainly Khartoum. Their children were staying like that without school.
Thanks to the financial support of charitable organizations like Aid to the Church in Need, the local church had the necessary financial resources that enabled it to set up and run schools. The first schools were established in church grounds, built solely with refugee labor. The fact that parents did not have to pay for their children's education proved immensely important.
We received our whole education at the archdiocesan schools. We did not have to pay any tuition fees. There was breakfast, and there was even free milk in the middle of the breaks. Exercise books were free, even writing pens. We wanted for nothing, even clothes were given away. Church schools in the area we lived in were regarded as the best local schools, because in those days, in the 1980s, teachers there were better than in state schools. People were afraid of attending state schools because they thought they would receive a Muslim rather than a Christian upbringing, which is also why Christians sent their children to diocesan schools. Church schools also taught English. State schools did not place such a high value on teaching English as did the diocesan schools.
Save the Saveable had been established to avoid the students to be Muslims when they are in secondary school. The program of Save the Saveable, it had been found to put the students in their religion from kindergarten up to university. That is the program that we are working on.
His name, Fee. His name, Go ahead, Shaka. No. Sarkam? Sarkam? Sarkam?
In the past time, the situation was very bad during the war. We have been hated as Christians here in the area. They used to attack us everywhere, even in the schools. We have our children who are Christians. They are also in these government schools there. In the government school, they don't have teachers to teach them Christianity. We tried our best as the Christian young community here in the church to participate our faith with these children, but that was very difficult.
Because of the high education standard and alternative program, Catholic schools attained renown amongst students and their parents. Concerned by the thought of well-educated Christians, the authorities began closing Catholic schools on a mass scale.
They did not want these children to be educated, or for whatever reason they said it was they wanted to demarcate the areas. And so they would send tractors. More than half of our schools, which were founded to respond to these needs of the children, were broken by the government. It was practically forbidden because they said it was not allowed to open churches. And since all these schools literally were also used for worship because Christians were coming there to pray on Sunday, on the other days they were used as schools. So the government got the pretext of trying to throw down the schools because you have opened churches illegally. And so that was the struggle all throughout the early 90s, up to 2000, between the government pulling down, destroying these schools, and the church opening them again. So it was a bitter time of persecution that the church went through. But the church was there, consistent, trying to respond to these needs, so that our children would not have access to education, or either that they would study in the government schools where they will eventually end up to be Muslims.
Young Christians who ended up in state schools risked an Islamic indoctrination that often resulted in a loss of identity.
Our study program in the archdiocesan schools was the same as the one in state schools, except that we practiced inherited customs and kept our religion, as opposed to those who studied in state schools. Boys from the south who studied in state schools converted to Islam. Their customs and language changed as a result of the dominating Arab environment.
It is a great problem for us and very painful that our children have to attend state schools and be subjected to Islamization. Without outside help, our schools will be unable to manage. We are quite simply losing young people, children. We are losing whole families.
After the Arabic Islamic military junta assumed power in 1989, Catholic schools had to accept the compulsory state teaching program and are, as a result, finding it very difficult to maintain their Christian character.
I have another book which is called Spine. The word is called Spine is Sudan Practical Integrated National English. They summarize it as spines. These books, they have changed it for the books which were being taught before. We have so many books which were being taught from England and Europe and American and all these places. And when the government came and said that we are Sudanese and we are under Arabic country, we have to follow the topic of the Arabic. So they changed and they made this book to be a Sudanese. We have here all great men and women. It's talking about Jabir ibn Hayyan. It's from the Arabic countries. We don't have plenty of things from Europe. Only they teach us about the Arab country.
He said that chemical laboratories should be built far away from residential area. Carrying out many experiments in heat and oxygen.
We have to understand the question of introducing Islam or Islamic or Quranic quotations in the syllabus, in the education syllabus, like in mathematics, in geography, in history, and so forth. This is not happening by chance. This is a strategy of the government.
The comprehensive peace agreement signed in 2005 finally brought the longed-for peace. Religious instruction in Catholic schools was again allowed, though the whole education system continued to remain under the control of the state.
It's a form of programmized Islamization. Even in our schools, the children have to learn whole fragments of the Quran by heart, because it will be in their exams. Having said that, our schools have a Christian atmosphere. There is prayer, religious instruction, and there is always the opportunity to pass on Christian values during the morning assembly. Values of love, forgiveness, mutual assistance, which they would quite simply not find in Muslim schools.
Czego po prostu nie znajdą w tych szkołach muzułmańskich.
For me, as a Christian, teaching religion is like a light. In our Christian schools, I teach about real things. Even at primary school level, the program talks about the jihad, but I try to invoke fragments from the Bible that talk about an alternative. Because if you grow up ignorant of your religious roots, you will remain ignorant. I am obliged, as a Christian, to teach children Christianity.
Running church schools in refugee camps has paradoxically proved more difficult in peace times than times of war. With the ending of the conflict, so did much of the foreign aid.
Everybody began washing their hands of any responsibility for our schools here, because the war had ended and peace had returned. But needs remain to be satisfied during peace, and they are not. We feel privation. I don't know why things have changed to such a degree, that when we teachers see that our students are deprived of something they badly need, or they need something that we cannot give them, we become very concerned. How can it be so? When I myself was taught, I received everything, so how can I now sit with a clear conscience? I don't know myself whether things were better during the war or now.
Many of the donor agencies who were helping the church during all those years, difficult years, got an information, the peace agreement has been signed. We were helping you because of the war, now the war is over, so please, we cannot help anymore. And so the resources began to shrink, it began to dwindle. And so it was impossible for the church to keep running so many institutions, so many schools at that scale with such big number.
Some schools are presently being closed. I'm a witness of that fact. Amongst others, the school in the Soba region. That school should have stayed and not been closed. This region has so many people and students from the former school. I pleaded with the church authorities that the school should remain open. They will undoubtedly have nowhere to go. They will not find a school.
There are currently 200 Save the Saveable schools in Sudan, including 54 primary schools and 131 nursery schools. There are around 1,200 teachers, including 200 dedicated to religious education. However, due to the difficult financial situation, the church has had to limit and reorganize its education commitments.
We had to train the teachers because to have qualified people to do the job. These were the reasons why we back on this restructuring program to respond to the strategic plan. The strategic plan meant reducing the schools, the number of schools, training the staff, building the ones that were only in local materials, in bad shape, raising them into good standard, setting up offices well so that we have a standard of at least a school to match. In fact, drafting a unified code of conduct for all Catholic schools. Many of these people who are staying in human situation outside in that desperate situation decided to go back to their places of origin, and so that reduced somehow the number of the people we were serving, the number shrank down, and so many of the schools we had to close or we had to merge the nearby ones because the number had reduced, and so people began going away. So these were the notable changes that happened. That is why the restructuring program was started.
Our school is not well suspended, and the school, even the environment of the school, this is not good because we have here only grasses and woods. This is not a good environment for the school. So we hope if we may get a good place for the school environment. Most of the people that have returned, they left their children here. The reason why, because there in the south, there are now teachers. Even the schools, the old schools are not maintained. So the elders go there to look for a job, just to build a house and to prepare a place for the children, so they go back. But most of the children that are still here in Khartoum.
The most urgent need certainly is to restructure the whole emergency program and bring in real educational values and strategies that are important for running a school, because these are people who we are not sure whether they will remain or they will go. Many of them are intending to remain in the north. I mean, they don't have anywhere to go, and therefore we have to, if possible, provide them to educate their children.
Today, the number of children participating in these teaching programs has decreased dramatically. 5 years ago, there were still 70,000 girls and boys involved, but today there are just 30,000 pupils within Khartoum and a further 2,500 outside Khartoum, in some small part due to the return of some Christians to the south. Alas, the most common reason for taking students out of schools comes down to poverty. As a result, some 20 to 25% of pupils don't pay any school fees at all.
Remember that during all those 15 years, the church was not collecting a single penny from the child. And so it was depending exclusively on the external help. Now with the external help being cut. How could we run these schools unless we had to ask their parents to contribute school fees in order to sustain these schools by themselves? This was a difficult thing because the 15 years of free service, free learning materials, free clothing, free food could not be changed. It created a mentality of dependency in the people. So when we began asking them for school fees, many of them did not understand it. They got disappointed. Others took their children out.
The Sudanese are too poor to pay teachers for their work, whilst the teachers cannot work for free. This is impossible. They have their own families. They must live.
Some parents are paying really, and those who cannot pay all the school fees, sometimes we used to allow them to go with educations because we are looking, first of all, for education for their children, not the money. And all of them, they are paying. Although they are poor, they don't have anything, they are displaced people, etc. They used to pay some of the school fees.
In spite of constant difficulties, Catholic schools continue to operate as best they can. They maintain a high standard of teaching so that even Muslims enroll their children.
Muslims are accepting to send their children to our schools every year. In different schools, we have many Muslims in our schools. They are believing in education, first of all, and they are looking for the future, and they are looking where good education are. The Catholic Church have improved the education in the north. This is why the parents are sending their Muslims to our schools.
A quarter of a century of work has yielded an impressive number of graduates.
We estimate that about 1 million children benefited from this Save the Saveable program in 3 different categories. Some studied and graduated up to university level. That might be less. We might be talking of 200,000 people. Others might have studied up to secondary level and so could not proceed to university for whatever reasons. Others studied, could not even finish the secondary level, but all the same they benefited from the Save the Saveable program.
What undoubtedly distinguishes the Save the Saveable program is the fact that it provides an opportunity for adult education, for grown-ups, who because of the need to support their families were unable to attend school when they were young.
أول في أسباب كتير خلاني أضم واحد إنه طبعاً الظروف.
I joined the school for a number of reasons. Firstly, circumstances prevented one from studying in the morning. Apart from that, one can go to work in the morning. Secondly, it's cheap, less than a state school. Thirdly, a Catholic education is assured. If I finish the school, I will go to university to study nursing. If not, then I will study management, so that I can help my poverty-stricken mother and father. I don't know what would happen if they closed this school. State schools are not for adults and are very expensive.
These educational facilities will be of help in trying to help the Christians who are here in the north, who will be then living in an Islamic environment, to know how to identify with one another and to know how to promote also their Christian identity, their Christian ideal.
Without this Save the Saveable program, believe me, I do not know where else could our displaced people have been taught. People who came from the south, from the east, from the west, the marginalized people, the black people of the southern Sudan, where could they have been taught? And these are the only people who are skilled now, who are able to teach or who are able to work in the NGOs or in the government of the southern Sudan. Our history could have been different without this simple Save the Saveable program. So it was providential.
If there's a one Christian remaining here, we shall be with that Christian. The 99, which was left by the pastor in the desert to follow the one who get lost, we shall do that. We shall remain to run after the one who has been straying in the desert. That is our vision.